Dear friends of emerging technologies, today we'll discuss whether blockchain technology is overrated or not. A blockchain is basically an innovative database that allows the transparent sharing of information, for example within a business network. The data is basically stored in blocks that are connected in a chain in chronological consistency, and this creates an unalterable ledger for tracking transactions, orders, payments, and accounts. But to really understand a blockchain, you need to understand at least the four following things, as those are the key parts of a blockchain. First, blocks. As the name already suggests, a blockchain comprises index blocks, each containing a time and date stamp, and of course also a hash from the previous block, that are all secured using cryptographic hash functions. Cryptographic hash functions then convert the data into unique, irreversible hashes. And also this ensures basically the data integrity and also forms a digital signature for each block. Next is a consensus mechanism, for example like proof of work. A proof of work verifies blocks by requiring miners to find a specific nonce that creates a specific hash that meets a specific criteria, and this is very important as it prevents tampering within a blockchain. And finally, there's decentralization. Decentralization basically means that new blocks are publicly broadcasted, and they're publicly broadcasted and that all the participants, they contain a copy of the peer-to-peer network. This is very important. It makes it very difficult to tamper transactions. But now let's look at the different types of blockchains. As it's not only just like one or two blockchains, there are a couple of different types, with each having can have a different role in society. First is the public blockchain. As the name already suggests, this is for public affairs. For example, it could be something for finance, or in general for an open marketplace. As with decentralized finance, it's possible to make transactions 24/7. There is no middleman needed like it's currently the situation, where it's not possible to trade on the weekends, for example, and there's only specific times. In crypto, there's already possible to trade 24/7, and this is because there is no middleman needed. And this removes also a lot of costs, but also makes it a lot less dependent on banks. It also could be interesting to be implemented in, for example, social media, and it would help to ensure more data resilience and integrity. Next is the private blockchain. This is exactly the opposite, and this is more something for when the data should not be publicly displayed. For example, in the healthcare sector, where the data could be very valuable and you don't want others to see it. It could be also interesting in general for organizations to track, for example, records, or for example, for governments to track records, licenses, for example. And this would be pretty useful to not share the data. Also, for example, the supply chain management within a company, as if they're managing some supply, they would be able to track all the data from start to finish, and they can identify, not only in this case in the supply chain sector, if there's some mistakes, they identify, as it's basically all on the blockchain, it's all visible. Next is basically a consortium, which in this case would be something that, for example, if companies are working together and they would operate together on a certain project, they would be able to use the same blockchain, and basically if they're cooperating, they could use the same blockchain to operate. And this could be very beneficial, as it forms basically more integrity and trust, as you could see directly what is going on. As on the blockchain, again, everything is visible. And finally, there's a hybrid, which I think will actually be the most useful one for the society, as it combines the private and the public blockchain. As I think it could be very beneficial, for example, for the real estate market, as you want the transactions to be, like, for example, publicly visible, and for example, the assets that are traded. But of course, you don't want your private information, like how you paid or something like this. You don't want to see that. So I think it will be like an interesting idea to combine those two things, for example, in the real estate market. And this could be pretty interesting, as it, for example, could allow for a lot of people to really participate in the real estate market, which is previously not possible, as the real estate market is unfortunately really illiquid. And this means that if you don't have the financial resources of at least like a couple $100,000, or you don't have the credit score to get the credit of this amount, it's basically impossible to participate. But this could actually open doors As in the decentralized financial market, for example, it would be possible to trade with fractional ownership of the real estate, for example, which would be pretty interesting to see. What could also be implemented is the voting system, for example, as you could see who is voted and who is basically eligible for voting and who received how many votes, for example, but you would not see who voted for who, as this is like still some private information that I think should not be shared. Well, this all sounds very nice. There's also a big aspect that needs to be covered, and that's the costs. As unfortunately, it's a lot more expensive to build a blockchain than you might think. First, let's look at the apps. For example, this could be like a social media, like a decentralized social media that I mentioned earlier, where the data integrity is improved and it's more visible for the average person what is going on with their data. This costs between 35 to 150,000, which is already quite a lot. It would take about 4 to 8 months. And the reason it's so expensive is because of the following costs. First, the development are already 50%. This is because you need very qualified people that have to use very advanced technology. As with crypto technology, and especially like using smart contracts and like very specific, it's not just like some specific coding, it's like very advanced. So you need very specific people, and those people are unfortunately very expensive. So it will take a lot of time, and also it will take a lot of money. But again, 50% are just development. Then about 25% are quality assurance. This basically involves that you, for example, look for some bugs or like do like any like bounty tests or like change like, for example, stuff, because once you start developing, you might have like some errors that need to be fixed. Also, the consulting could take about like 10% too, as you probably need to consult with some experts to work out the best strategy that is best suitable for you. What is also interesting and what is somewhat even forgotten is that also you need some part for the designing, as you need to build like a completely new thing. You need to build like a completely new application. This can take about to 15%, up to 15%. Of course, this all depends on the range, so I don't give specific numbers, but it could also be the case that you need to consult with some other third parties. And of course, you also need to do some maintenance to really ensure that you have the highest quality. And there might need to be some updates done, for example, changing the consensus mechanism or fixing some key errors, for example. This, of course, can also basically ensure some extra costs, which I probably think will be could be from 15 to like 25%, of course, depending on the team you have and of course the budget you invest. The other thing is, for example, a wallet. A cryptocurrency wallet that I used for this example could illustrate how much it could actually cost to build a wallet that could be completely decentralized, where there is no bank needed, where everything would just work on a pure core and network. And this is even more expensive, as it costs from 125 to 200,000. The development time is even longer. It could be from 5 to 9 months. And the reason that it's so expensive is basically the same, as you need, again, 50% for development, as it's very difficult to develop a decentralized wallet. You need 50%. Then you need 25% for quality assurance. You need to do some testing. You need to probably fix some errors. Then on the other side, you also need 10% for the consulting, as you probably need some external experts to really find the best strategy on what and how you can structure your wallet. And of course, you need to also do the design, which is of course also very important, as if you don't invest a lot in the design, I think it will be very difficult to really stick out and to really gain some users. And again, the numbers are pretty similar. Development is 50, quality assurance is 25, consulting is 10, and designing is 15. Again, there might be some external costs that I'm not going to mention, but I think the maintenance fee will probably be in the same range, from 15 to 25. And the third party costs probably also be very dependent, of course, but I think could be like 5 even to 10%. Of course, all depending. Now, let's identify if blockchains are actually overrated. What speaks against blockchains? Well, first, there is a misconception of its current use cases, as blockchains are primarily built for digital currencies that are used without central banks. and this limits its other use cases. Also, at the moment, there are append-only databases, which basically means that they are great for errors, but not great for processing real-time data. And in general, the immutability of blockchains can be considered a big problem, as once a blockchain is basically uploaded and publicly visible, it's very difficult to fix errors, as the so-called smart contracts, which are basically automated agreements, they always execute certain conditions if certain things are met. And this is done no matter what. And this can be considered a problem, as this can basically mean if there are some key errors made that customers will, for example, lose all their money with a transfer. Or in general, it can just mean that the blockchain has an inaccurate record. And this makes it easier for hackers to tamper transactions in the future. Also, in general, when comparing the database that are traditionally used to a blockchain, they're actually winning at the moment regarding synchronous and blocking operations. They are more efficient, they're more faster than blockchains. And in general, there's a blockchain regarding privacy concerns and lack of access. Lack of access, again, because it's very difficult to actually fix errors once they're implemented in the blockchain. And there are also privacy concerns, as while we like blockchain technology for its transparency, where it's possible to see all the transactions publicly, some people don't like it, and I totally agree. Sometimes I don't want all my data to be displayed publicly. So I totally don't criticize people who actually don't like blockchains for that reason. And another point is that the consensus mechanisms, at least at the moment, they're too inefficient. They're too inefficient in the moment to really embrace a high scalability. And this is a big problem, as if this is not corrected, and if this is not massively improved, there is no way blockchain technology is implemented in our everyday lives, or is actually expanding in its use cases. As scalability is one of the key things that need to be fixed, as the blockchain needs to be able to handle many million transactions to be really implemented in our everyday lives. And unfortunately for now, there's still a long way to go there. But now let's look at the advantages. Why should we implement blockchain technology? Why should we like the technology? Well, there are also a couple of reasons. As while immutability can be considered a weakness, as it's very difficult to change and fix errors, if there are no errors that appear in the blockchain, it can also be very good, as the security is enhanced, as it's not basically impossible to change the transactions with the blockchain. And this enhances security. Also, privacy concerns can be, for example, met with data anonymization, with permissionless-based access. And this can also be met with data not being stored on a single server, but rather on a network of computers. And this is one of the things I like the most, that the data is not only processed by one server, which is the case traditionally. It's just one server, and if this server has problems, the whole data is basically invalid. Or for example, a transaction is invalid. But if it's a network of transactions with multiple computers, the chances that the transaction will actually be successful are much higher. Also, the traceability is improved with blockchain technology. And the traceability, for example, means that you can identify basically the life of an asset, so to speak, how the asset was transferred from start to end. And this could, for example, be great for fighting like money laundering problems or generally human rights problems, as you could see if there are some dubious moves made with transactions. So this would be great. It would not only be great for the officials that can use those data, for example, in finding those criminals and identifying the crime, it can also be good for consumers, as they can see what kind of asset they're dealing with. Also, in general, the transparency is a lot higher. The transparency is higher, and this can also be interpreted in both ways. As well, some people don't like their data to be displayed. The transparency can also just show, for example, in the food industry, if all the ingredients, where they're coming from, how they are produced, from start to finish. And I think this actually could be a very good point for the industry. As for this industry, it could mean that the customers have more trust in the product, for example. So I don't think it's only bad. But funny thing is, though, the greatest plus at the moment is its efficiency and speed. As well, at the moment, we're not where we want to be. The efficiency can already be noticeable. And the reason I say that is because if you think about it, the efficiency is actually not that high. If you, for example, want to make transactions across around the globe, of course, it's very difficult. You need a lot of paperwork, it takes a lot of time. And also it not only you have to do the paperwork, then the officials have to look through it, and then they have to process the transaction. This takes a lot of time and also nerves. And if there are big sums of money, this can literally take forever. But with blockchain technology, this could really be changed in the future, as it's a lot easier to make a transaction with a blockchain. And with a blockchain, it could also just give a guideline on basically the papers that are needed. And it could basically be all done online and a lot faster. And the speed can also be a lot faster, as already if you make transactions with a blockchain, it's much faster, as the blockchains, they need no intermediaries. They need no banks to process the transaction. It's a network of computers that validates it, a consensus mechanism that basically ensures that the money is sent to the other party. And this is a big plus, as transactions, they only take up to a couple of hours, which with traditional online banking takes one day, couple of days, sometimes even weeks. And in some countries, unfortunately, it's still not possible, because every time you're relying basically on a third party like a bank, which in some countries the access is very limited. Now, let's look at the industries that could profit the most. I think the food and supply chain industry can profit a lot from this technology, as they can form a higher trust with customers, as basically they could show the root that of all the ingredients that basically the food was made of. And they can also track if there are, for example, some problems that can occur when producing this product. The company can already react and can already fix those problems. And this is very beneficial for both sides, for consumers and producers. While the producers, they save a lot of costs, the consumer also knows that the quality is a lot higher. And also there will be no things like having to send it back, or like not being sure what's in the food or something. So I think it will be a win for both sides. Also, I think the financial sector could also benefit from this. As again, I think there could be a decentralized financial system where it's possible to trade 24/7 without intermediaries, where it's basically possible to even buy a fraction of an ownership, for example, in the real estate market, with a hybrid blockchain, with basically a private and public blockchain that displays, for example, the transaction, the amount of money that you have to transfer, but don't display your personal information, for example. I think that would be a big win for both sides. I think also the healthcare sector would profit from this hybrid technology problem as blockchain. As with the hybrid blockchain, again, some data will be displayed and it's possible for them to track the data, but also they don't display the data, for example, of the patients. And it could also be the case that there could be some interoperability, for example, that if, for example, a customer, in this case a healthcare customer, has problems, the data could be, for example, easier be sent from one blockchain to another. And this could be also a very big plus. But of course, the data needs to be private, as of course the patient don't want his data to be displayed publicly. And of course, neither would I. I think no one of us would like to see that. Also, I think the government sector would profit from this, as it can, for example, help to identify, for example, money laundering crimes or similar, with being able to track products and, for example, of assets from start to end. I think it will be a win for both sides. So what can we finally say? Are blockchains actually overrated or not? Well, at the moment, at least, I would say they're actually a bit overrated. They already have some use cases, but I think they're a bit overhyped at the moment. I think, though the technology is very promising, but I think if the technology continues to improve, which I think it will, I think there could be some massive implementations. And already a lot of companies are working on that. But at the moment, at least, I have to say it's a bit overrated, as they're not as efficient as some of us may think, and they're not a solution for everything. I think, though, there's still some things that need to be fixed. For example, the blockchain trilemma, which basically consists of scalability, decentralization, and security. I think those three things need to be fixed at the same time. And this is already very well known in the blockchain world, and something that a lot of companies are already claimed to fix, but have not really fixed so far. So I think if this would be fixed, there would be already a big step. And again, I think it will still need some time to be really implemented. And also, I think it would be very important that there's some education done in this space. As for some people, it might be scary that all the data is transparently visible. So I think there needs to be some education done. And I think it's very important to not display and find a good solution for all the data being displayed but not publicly visible, if that makes sense. I think this would be a very big step, as it's still a bit uncomfortable to completely share all the data and seeing all your transactions that are basically visible for everyone. Also, what I think is needs to be fixed in general is the consensus mechanism. I think they need to be changed, they need to be fixed, they need to be a lot more efficient. And in general, the whole industry, they need to get more credibility. As some people still think that crypto technology basically is only about Bitcoin and speculative investing. So I think there needs to be a lot more education also done in this space. And in general, when just looking at the energy consumption, it's unfortunately way too high. So this also is something that needs to be a lot more efficient and basically be improved to be really scalable and also acceptable by the public. So in total, I think it is a bit overrated at the moment. But I think in the future, while the technology improves and while the trilemma is fixed, that's basically preventing mass adoption, I think blockchain technology has a chance in the future to be really implemented in the financial market and also in other areas, like the government sector, the supply chain sector, but also for markets like the real estate. But for now, it's for me a bit improbable that it will change anytime soon. So I think it will still need like a couple of years, maybe even a decade. But we will see. Do you agree with me that blockchain technology is, at the moment at least, a bit overrated? Or do you think I completely got it wrong and that blockchain technology is actually serving its real use case, its real purpose? Let me know. I will see you in the next video.